Wonderful. Well, why don't we begin? Hi, everyone. This is Anna Kinsani with Springboard Enterprises. I run community and partnerships. Springboard is a global organization of women entrepreneurs, and we run accelerator-like programs. We've been around 20 plus years and now have 820 alumni entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs in our network. We have 3 of them here today. Springboard is soon to launch our first podcast, the Been There, Run That podcast. And it will be a series of 5 conversations with Springboard entrepreneurs. The theme is that we'll be talking to different women on the topics of from idea to IPO. So from starting a company to exit. And we'll be kind of teasing some of those themes and topics out in this panel today. And so excited to have 3 of our, again, Springboard alumni women here with us to discuss. So before we get started, I wanted each of you to introduce yourself. Amita, why don't we start with you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Amita Soni. I have a 20-plus year track record of transforming cool technologies into successful companies. I've held diverse roles with startups as a founder, CEO, CMO, investor, and board director, helping raise over 100 million in venture capital, facilitating 2 public offerings, and positioning several other companies for successful acquisition. I've successfully taken new products and services from concept to market and developed new markets, leading to over 600 million in sales. Developing go-to-market strategies and building strong partnerships is a particular strength. I now deliver dramatic growth for digital health and tech companies in my consulting practice by developing and executing winning strategies, often serving as an interim CMO. I'm also a member of the Maroon Venture Partner Fund's investment committee and hold board roles with portfolio companies Home Practice, Homebinder, and Top the Organic Project. And several of Maroon's portfolio companies have women founders. And I'm thrilled to be here today with the rest of you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Dee, why don't we jump over to you?
Hi, I'm Dee Chan, and I'm the president and co-founder of Future Proof Retail. So we're one of the early leaders of the new frictionless checkout industry, which was really established when the e-giants of the East and West, Amazon and Alibaba, came offline and compete in the physical retail space. So we position ourselves as the affordable and trusted technology providers that help retailers compete with the Amazons of the world. We offer the #1 scan and go mobile checkout solution that brings the best of online capabilities, the convenient checkout, the personalized recommendation into physical retail stores. We're currently live on 3 continents, 5 retail verticals, and we're very excited to kind of be part of this new industry.
Amazing. And Kayla.
Hello, everyone. A pleasure to be here, whether it's good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's an honor to be on this panel. It's also an honor to be part of the Springboard Network. I'm Kayla Graff. I'm the CEO and Sweet Bio. We're a Memphis, Tennessee-based company that had an audacious idea that topical, messy, and short-term could be used in advanced ways in medicine to deliver a solid, implantable sheet. So it's been a 6-year journey to bring this idea from a lab through the manufacturing and FDA process, patents, 14 across the nation and many more across the globe and many more pending, and into early commercialization and early strategic conversations. Prior to this, I was at Target Corporate for many years in a variety of roles, whether big data analytics, operations, scaling globally, and then in internal consulting and organizational effectiveness. And through my time at Target, I really used it as an opportunity to study the skills I wanted to be as an entrepreneur, to bring to my business someday. You know, that attention to detail, but the ability to see the forest through the trees. How do you communicate effectively and help folks move from one place to where you want them to be, but ultimately to build a brand that resonates with people and a company people wanted to work for. So in the medical device space, those are not typically things you bring to the table. And it's been wonderful to see how we build a consumer-friendly brand in a very technical medicine space that is now starting to see patient pull. Specialty is breaking business models, think drastically differently on how products can come to market and how they deliver value to the end user.
Amazing. Thanks, Kayla. We, selected these entrepreneurs not only because of their immense expertise in their space, but also they cover different industry verticals and also kind of come in at different their strengths are throughout the whole business life cycle. So I'm excited to hear more from them. So want to start with the theme of networking. And, people talk about networking all the time in different ways. Springboard being such a global network of entrepreneurs with women from stages of, pre-seed all the way to exit IPO. How have you each utilized the power of networking? And I'd love to hear any Springboard specific connections or other examples of organizations that you have felt has really helped catapult your not only business, but maybe even confidence as an entrepreneur to kind of help you get through the tougher times. And I'd love to start with Dee Dee for this one.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think the concept of networking is often too broad and diffuse. I think people often imagine you're in a room, you're meeting a lot of smart and capable people, you're connecting, you're talking and hoping that somehow something will happen. And I think the power of networking means that you can predictably predict and make something happen. So what I really appreciate about being part of Springboard and New York Fashion Tech Lab, which is how I entered Springboard, is that it is very focused networking. The entrepreneurs, the industry leaders, the advisors, everybody is in there thinking about a business problem and figuring out what they have to offer, what they know, if they've been there before, so what the other people are missing. And they come in with a give and a get, and we are there to work to actually make that thing we wanted to happen with network happen. So a really good example is I was part of New York Fashion Tech Lab 2020 cohort. So we launched in the middle of a pandemic, which completely disrupted the fashion industry. So as a retail fashion tech business, we are the secondary business that serve fashion retailers' primary business. So while we're waiting for the fashion industries to figure out their COVID response, it doesn't make sense for us to do business development when they have to figure out their primary business first. Like technology is the last thing on their mind. They don't have the time. They had to figure out what they want to do. However, we know that the moment they figure out their game plan, they're going to need to move fast. They're going to need to know what is the best solution out there that fits them, that works. So instead of each of us figuring out our own marketing plan, pitching our own stories, we came together and we created a fashion technology collective, a free platform on LinkedIn where we curated all of the best voices from the network we met in Springboard and in Fashion Tech Lab, where we bring about all of the latest fashion technology news, where we tell our own story as industry expert in the field, and we amplify each other as well. That way, with the purpose that when the pandemic strategy came to being and retailers are looking for what solution can help me, we can give answers to that question and we can point them in the right direction, and we can do it way more effectively collective and together. So that is a really good example of a networking resource that we came directly from Springboard and New York Fashion Tech Lab.
Amazing. Love that. And also just kind of rolling with the punches of, okay, can't control a pandemic, but what can we control? And I love that you guys took control of that. Amita, why don't we jump over to you? Oh, and you're muted.
plus one to what Didi just said about the focus in networking, because absolutely the network is hugely helpful, but that focus becomes a big plus. I have met just a ton of great people through Springboard and other organizations like the MIT Enterprise Forum Cambridge, which I chaired, and TIE Boston. And I've known Amy Millman at Springboard for a long time, and she is just amazingly helpful, not just to the current cohorts any particular year, but just the broader Springboard community. And in fact, so when it comes to networking, I've certainly learned a lot. I mean, the idea is you connect with people to see how you can help them, and then how you may learn something from them in exchange, right? And so whether it's new technologies or business opportunities or other things, it's just been very, very helpful. But it's also helped me as I broadened my network to increase my visibility and provided a way to connect to potential customers and partners as well. And someone in chat asked, and I just maybe take a quick swing at that, asked about the value of networks versus communities for founders. They both have their place. The network is a broader network, but the community of founders, it keeps you from having to reinvent the wheel, because all of us, when we've been entrepreneurs, time is of essence, right? I mean, you're trying to be super productive, do a lot of things and make sure you're focused on that. But at the same time, if you can learn from the others and see what to do, more of that, and keep you from doing something that someone has tried, not quite right, and just benefit from each other's networks, it all works out very well.
And that is why, based on a book that our chairman, Kay Koplovitz, put together, I think 2014, that's where the Been There, Run That name came from, is that is the whole idea of, Springboard's network, is that we have women and we're cultivating connections of women that have been there and run that, so that it can be passed along to companies that come through this year and years to come. So Kayla, would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what's been said, and add a couple, I would say, one piece of advice, a story, and then I'll try to tackle the network versus community too. But the biggest thing we learned earlier on was the value of building networks without the expectation of a return. A lot of times we need specific things, and when you need a specific thing, ask for it. And it's very helpful to have a group of people to go ask it from. But when you just build relationships to be helpful and to serve, and just, with zero expectation that you're going to get something out of it immediately, that is where I've seen funding come in. I've seen customers come in. I've seen mentors and advisors come in, throughout this process of us building Sweet Bio in 6 years. It's not just a journey of the company, it's a journey of my life. We started the company, I got engaged. We raised $1 million, I had gotten married. We raised our second million, I had a kid. I'm 2 kids in at this point. And so it's hilarious, but this is life. And, for me, the network helps open doors for the business, but the community helps get me where I need to be in every new stage of the business, armed and ready, and avoiding the mistakes that many of us have made before us, and we have the luxury to learn from. And so having that authentic, desire to build relationships to help offer what you can, dividends will be paid from it. But coming with that, pureness of it has been the biggest door opener for us. And to give you an example, here in Memphis, there's an organization called the Epicenter, and it is the central hub for startups. And we started the company and they started at the same time. All the time we could, I had just moved from San Francisco out to Memphis. We chose to be in Memphis, and I wanted the city to be successful. So I joined a bunch of boards and started helping this organization, which allowed me to get on the board of the organization, the only entrepreneur. And for me to be one of 20-ish to go to the US Senate and present to the Entrepreneurial Caucus and have a conversation about female entrepreneurs. And that to me right there is and it was a multi-year journey, but not only value personally for me to continue to build my brand and tell my company story, but to add value to this cause that we're all so obviously passionate about, of seeing each other succeed. And over the last year during the pandemic, this whole network and community, I'd like to admit, to call my community and say, I don't know how to do this. Who should I talk to? Where do I go from here? I'm scared, I'm nervous, or I'm excited. I did that, and just to have someone to talk to. So that's where I've seen this value come from. And Springboard has just completely opened my mind to what mentorship, to networking, and what community could look like. And honestly, I don't know where we would be without them.
Oh, very sweet. And I agree. I mean, it does take patience, but I think the more you put in the work without that expectation of return, and the more you see how many more doors that can open when you're not focused on one specific goal for your networking purposes. Sometimes that's necessary, right? Like sometimes I'm going to hit the pavement until I make enough connections to then, get my, first couple of customers, whatever it is. But so many times you just want to, really vary your network as well, because you just never know how it all ties together, which I think is really helpful as well. All right, so we'll move to the next kind of question and topic. So one of Springboard's mottos, something that our founder, Amy Millman, says a lot, is entrepreneurship is not a spectator sport. How have each of you embodied that? And some things to work in might be, what were your strengths coming in as a CEO or co-founder or founder? And where did you realize for running a company that you needed to bring in other support or help? And why don't we start with Amita?
I've spent a lot of time with early stage companies working with diverse technologies, applications, and markets. And my strength had been in terms of really getting a deep understanding of the market, the needs, the timing, the trends, and what it meant in terms of not just the product, shaping the product offering, but in terms of the sale itself, right? Who the buyers would be, what the buying process would look like, the budgets, and just kind of all of that. How do you get to that stage? But that said, absolutely, through my entrepreneurial journey, some of the ventures have done very well, and others, let's just put it very kindly, were great learning experiences. But through all of this, what I did learn was that time is of essence, right? When you see that the growth opportunities there's this one particular moment in time which you need to seize to grow, And with that, that's the kind of that understanding when you ask, that's a point where you need to add additional resources to kind of complement where you are, because all of us have been there with startups or early stage companies where, as the founder, co-founder, or part of the early team, you're doing a lot of the, there are multiple tasks, but certainly a lot of the selling yourself, right? But for me, it felt like to grow it further, just adding more resources in terms of the sales efforts was a big plus.
Great. And Kayla, you're kind of more on the marketing expertise side too, starting your company. How did you kind of jump in with your marketing perspective, but then, figure out what you needed in addition to that expertise to really build the company?
In hindsight, many times I'm like, did I seriously start a medical device company? Like, coming from Target Corporate, literally not a science background in my life. I mean, it's just audacious, it's so fascinating to look back. And I remember where I was when we made this decision that we were going to do this. And we took micro steps to de-risk along the way. But what I knew I could bring to the table was a way to approach this industry differently. What I saw was a pretty outdated industry with stagnant innovation and massive pain. And when I say pain, it's not, people have pain points. It is literally, there are millions of wounds that are happening as we speak that are not healing, that are causing horrible things to happen, including patient death. And it's not just here in the States. And I couldn't sleep at night thinking about why the industry was structured the way it was, why we couldn't have products with materials that we could get behind that are nice to performance, that could be the top performing and materials we love. And for me, it's starting to think about how could we look at this differently? And that comes from this foundational concept of, we can at what we don't want to do. So a lot of people talk about failing because you tried something. It's like, well, you can fail at things you hate. You could be in a job that you don't like and you can get laid off. There are things that happen when you're doing things that you don't like, just the same amount of doing things that you do love. And so, of course you have to take calculated risks. Of course you have to think differently, but I'm hardwired with that. And I knew if I could bring that approach to this industry, it's to help millions of people heal. And earlier on, my gosh, like, your name is Sweet Bio. You don't sound scientific. How old are you? Are you the intern? All of these conversations. And I'm like, I will send you a postcard in the future. You're not there yet, but you will be. And the truth is, a marketer, Amita, you said it so beautifully, and that should be like the story of business is timing and listening to what the market has to say. You'll latch on to a big problem, understand the trends that are colliding, be able to chart a path to get to a vision that you can bring through fruition. You are going to be successful. Your product's going to change throughout it, but if you can hold true to and trusting that you hear these and know the voices to listen to, and know when to ignore the ones that are not helpful, you can be successful. And those are some of the skills I knew I could bring to the table. Really thinking really differently, being bold, looking and listening to the market and seeking that market feedback and incorporating it, and being able to build maps on how to make that successful. And when we started feeling these pain points of like, I don't know how to build a quality management system, I don't know how to scale manufacturing to 1 million units, those pain points we started writing down and grouping into job descriptions. And that allowed us to say, you know what? We need a quality person. We need some support on this commercial go-to-market strategy in this space. And so we allowed the early pain points to say, okay, we're getting pretty close to needing someone, and I don't want to be in a position where I don't have someone. So let's start socializing that now. I'd say a big piece of advice, if anyone hasn't done Strength Finders recently, especially post-pandemic, it's a great time to do it, because a lot of it is making sense to me now, in this kind of pressure cooker we're all in. And it's been wonderful to just sit down with the team and do it.
That's a good point. And it is interesting comparing pre and post, because I know even like things like the Enneagram or, Myers-Briggs or whatever, it's like I felt like I've kind of shifted on some of my answers post-pandemic. And I don't know, it's an interesting evaluation for StrengthsFinder too. What strengths do you have now that you didn't? What strengths have shifted? And also maybe what are some strengths that you haven't exercised in a while that you need to get back? And I think that's really important too, to think, wow, I'm not really good at that, or I don't feel as good at that anymore because I haven't been out in the field, and realizing that, it might take some building back up before you get there. So that's a great point. And the other thing before we get to you, Dee Dee, that I wanted to mention that came to mind was that I love the concept of sometimes you're the person that's in your own way. And if you just tell yourself, like, get out of your own way, there is, and sometimes it's scary because when you get out of your own way, there is infinite potential of where you can go. And I think, it's a scary concept, but that is how entrepreneurs push through, is they get out of their own way, and they are very careful in deciding who they listen to and who they don't. So great advice and story there, Kayla. Dee Dee, want to get to you on, entrepreneurship is not a spectator sport. I know you dig in and are very hands-on with everything in your business. What do you think's been your greatest strength going into business, and maybe where have you brought on extra support?
Absolutely. And I want to echo Amita's point of paying attention to industry timeline, as well as Kayla mentioning doing things differently and really, really listening. I think that ties into what I bring to the table in Future Proof. My partner and I actually met in a philosophy club, and we bonded over the value of time. On a meta level, I believe in maximizing human potential, by removing friction and time, by aligning value with profit, as well as creating a win-win business practice that we can keep on paying it forward. So the foundation of our company is built by these philosophy and these ideas of how we want to work with each other, the team, how we want to work with our clients, our partners, our investors. So it's kind of idealistic, it's kind of thinking it differently. And my strength is, prior to this, I work in the education industry. So my strength is one, in market research and to really understand what's happening, what is the trend. Like I noticed that the e-giants were going to come offline before they did, and how we can harness that power and not just look at it at US, look at it from a global perspective. And my other strength is to really focus and notice what is people's individual strength and bring the best out of people, bring the best out of my team, bring the best out of the little ecosystem we created in frictionless checkout retail technology. So taking these two strengths, there was two big things I've learned, and that's kind of echoed here already. First, timing matters, exactly what Amita mentioned. And in every industry, there's their own industry timeline. So a one-size-fits-all solution, a business solution that you just follow the checkbox, doesn't work. And retail technology specifically, it's a really long sales cycle. It is sticky. It is a very good solution, but it takes a long time. So a lot of startups will fail and bankrupt before they have a chance to prove themselves. So noticing that, instead of just following the trend and having more than 80% probability of failing, what we did is we have to shorten that timeline. So what we did is the things that everybody typically invests in early on, like marketing, a lot of money on promoting the brand building, or building your own in-house sales force really early on, we see that as ineffective because the timeline is so long that whatever you spend this season of marketing is not going to generate the business and the return that you need to push you forward. So what we did is we really focus on a collaboration approach. We work with startups for marketing, like I mentioned earlier before in the networking question. And we also work with established companies to kind of outsource the sales. So we can focus on what we're good at. We're really good at the technology. We've been making apps since the launch of the App Store, and there is no team that has as much mobile know-how in the retail tech space as our team. So we focus on that, and we share our success, and we share our journey, and we mitigate the risk. So by focusing on the value of time and also looking at how we can create a win-win solution, philosophy of being collaborative, we're able to see some of the trends that didn't work for many of the retail technology companies that are ahead of us, and made different choices to make it more collaborative, to make it easier to respect the timeline of our industry, and to make it way more transparent. We're like the first and the only company that put our pricing and our strategy completely online. And this transparency follows what Kayla was talking about, which is listening to our clients. So this transparency means we listen to what retailers want, and we are just the service provider, and we can address what they want, and we can offer them trust from the early get-go. So there's not one-on-one negotiation, so we can make things faster, smoother, and so we can actually break the cycle, prove our solution, and lead a new industry.
Amazing. Thanks, Didi. And I want to kind of stick on this topic of growth and strategy. And I think each of you kind of veered into some of these specific tips. And Didi, I think you just did an amazing job of giving very specific examples of, we knew the tech. And so this is what we knew we needed to outsource. And I know now twice the phrase, mitigating risk has been mentioned, because entrepreneurship is maybe one of the riskiest things you could ever do in your life. And so mitigating it is maybe, an important part of the growth aspect of it so that things don't go wrong. So just to quote, Kayla, you said this in our recorded podcast, if 90% of people think your idea is good, you're already too late. And I think, that speaks a lot to what you guys have just said about timing and watching the market and listening and trying to get ahead. But I kind of want to stay on the theme of growth and strategy of, what are some other specific either points in your business where you thought, okay, that was a breakthrough moment where I felt like we went from startup to actually like a growth or getting to be a growth stage company, or any specific like kind of tangible strategy points like Dee Dee mentioned. And I wanted to start with you, Kayla.
Yeah, I'm like, brava, Dee Dee. Amazing. Love that. So I'll share just a recent example of kind of a big aha moment that can happen 6 years into a company. So we were preparing pre-pandemic up until March of 2020 to alpha launch our, this sheet form for chronic and acute wound care that happens in the operating room. And we were ready. The data was looking fantastic and we had partners on board, and then insert pandemic. And the first thing that really necessarily it needed to happen, shut down, was elective surgeries in operating rooms to reallocate those resources in the hospital to patients who needed treatment for COVID-19. And in that moment, we took a second to normalize and say, okay, plans are changing. Cool. I love being a wartime CEO. Let's go and figure this out. After we made sure everybody was okay, we then kind of moved forward and said, where do we go from here? And it's just the perfect moment to just act as a very baby company and say, what should we do? Let's go listen. Let's go see where we can uniquely add value. This data is fantastic we have on our product. Let's go unpack that further. We have time that we can go work with our study partners and see what is it uniquely that is driving that value. And a couple things came out of it. The first, we discovered that we're the first multi-action product on the market. Everything is single, I want to take bacteria on, inflammation, growth factors, very targeted. We had this comprehensive product. We were also one of the only ones that was shelf stable and able to be kept for several years. And it is one of the easiest to use products available. So let's layer on what we're good at with what happened in the industry, this massive shift to virtual first and home care preferred. So what do you do, right? In an industry like dentistry, you can't shift that to the home. That has to stay in the office. But what do you do in the wound care space when the care does happen in the office, yet all of the advanced products are not able to transition to home care? That is a fascinating chasm. That is an unmet opportunity. Now, there's, of course, barriers. How does reimbursement work with that and come around? But this concept, being able to take a step back and intake this concept of advanced wound care for all. I mean, it is audacious and it is necessary. It doesn't cannibalize anything else. It's just missing. And in this process, we started to get feedback from strategists like, yes, this is something we are, our business dipped because of the pandemic and terms. We need to make up in home care. We want innovation. We want to use this technology to coat other things. It just opened up two huge business models for us and has allowed us to sunset the original one that we were going to do. And so, it's been fascinating to see these aha moments continue to happen if you just sit back and listen and are willing to intake them and never lose sight that you're here to solve a problem. And that problem's going to change with the macro environment. And you've got to be the fastest to be able to see where the puck's going and skate towards it and pressure test it. But that right there is what I'm living in right now. And I'm sure many more aha moments to come as we continue to normalize.
That's a great example. Thanks for sharing that story. And again, I mean, there's just countless stories of folks that have had to move very quickly, and it's definitely tested, how they are as a founder, and hopefully given many founders more confidence in what they're capable of and what they can do, and really made them think outside the box and think in new ways, which is exactly what you guys are doing and continue to do. So, Amita, why don't we go to you? Working in so many different companies, but kind of having the same strategic role, what are some tips on your side that you've seen really help a company, maybe, from a strategy side, really go from, startup to, we're on to something here in terms of growth? Oh, and you're muted. Yeah.
Now, two things. One, we absolutely see the growth, possibilities, a lot of different markets perhaps, but it is having that focus, so that's one part of it, and saying there's plenty of white space, but what do you focus on first? Where do you see you're going to get the most bang for the buck? It just, that has big rewards. But the other thing, as Kayla was trying to say, and we have all seen in this last year or so, there are things which happen from a market perspective, which are a real shocker. It's like a totally unexpected thing. And how do you react to that? And I'll give an example. This is a young company where I'm actually an investor on the board. It is a company founded by two women. They provide organic feminine hygiene products, And the idea was initially to sell through the grocery channel, where a lot of that wasn't happening. And they had a lot of experience in that sector as well. But then the COVID hit, and they did an excellent job of emphasizing what they were doing before already on the e-commerce side and expanding into new of the e-commerce outlets as well. And when the timing was right, they're back in and some of the largest grocery chains nationwide. So it's like, things happen, but how do you kind of work around it to still stay with the original, the original strategy, but react to the fact that there are external conditions happening. So it may have to change for a while, but then you can go back to it and see how you can continue to add value.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, question on funding. So let's go to this last question, and then we'll talk a little bit about funding. Because I think sometimes I feel like we talk about the funding part and we don't talk about the exit part. And I think it's really important. Something else that Springboard really stresses to our companies is that you should be thinking about your exit from day one. So how can you build a company with whatever your potential exit is in mind, whether that means, lawyer up from day one, whether that means, thinking about a super long financial plan to then, narrow it down to your next 6 to 18 months. There's a lot of benefits. So I'm curious how each of you have thought about a potential end game, and that can change, of course, with new information and new partners and new funding. But how have each of you thought of that, and why do you, or maybe do not, think it's important to think that way? And Didi, why don't we start with you?
I can actually answer the exit question and the funding question in one. It's not a surprise that it is difficult to fundraise, especially for female founders. We get a smaller proportion of the money. And even if you look at like the VC fundraising chart of just all companies, even if you get C-stage funding, like every stage after that, more than 50% of the company kind of just drop out. You don't make it to Series A. If you make it to Series A, you might not get to Series B, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you look at the classic funding model and the classic exit strategy, majority of startups are forced exit sooner than they want without a big success. But we don't talk about that because everybody focus on like the unicorn and this standard model where everybody have to say we have the same financial trajectory because that is what we want to look at. So absolutely, I agree with Springboard that we have to think about exit strategy. And for us, what that means is it is a sustainable business. So if your company depend on investors to survive, you do not have a sustainable business, which is the popular model where you invest to grow, to get market share. But the moment you don't have the next investor lined up, your company is dead. So an alternative business model, which is your company can survive based on the product and the service you sell. So your client should be able to keep you alive. And so for us, it was really, really important that we get to sustainability as fast as possible, because there's just so many different market forces. There's so many things that's out of our control. You can be the best person, you can have the best pitch, but you're not guaranteed every round of fundraising. You can finish your C stage, you can go to Series A, and you will be, if you don't make it, you will be in the majority of people that don't make it. So when we look at funding, when we bring investors on board, we ask ourselves, what is the fastest way we can take this money to get us to a point where we don't need more money? And this is a chicken and an egg problem that a lot of entrepreneurs face. And, they always say, when you don't need money, you can get the money. It sucks, but it is true. And so the way you think about how you don't need the money to get the money is think about your business and how fast you can get to a viable business model that is sustainable. Especially for female-run companies, I believe sustainability is so important, and which is why we have a transparent business model, which is why echoing Amita's point about understanding the time of your industry, understanding your own business timeline. How can you survive your own time game and stay ahead of it, just one step ahead of it? And once you can hit a sustainable model, then every single exit strategy is open up for you. And many people think of the classic getting sold by a bigger company. That is an option if you don't need them and you can negotiate, or IPO, but besides IPO on like the big stock exchange, if you have a global vision, you can also look at different global IPO, which has different requirements, that's easier. And if you have a sustainable business model that you can just grow and grow and grow again, it's very easy to plug into multiple different markets. So when my advice for female founders when thinking about exit strategy is like take into consideration of your business and taking into consideration of us as female founders in this current business environment. We're disadvantaged. We're working to solve that, but we're still significantly disadvantaged. So look at the math and do things differently, kind of like Kayla talked about thinking outside the box. So my recommendation is think what we're good at. We're nourishing. We're good at collaborating. Like some of the feminine quality we bring to an industry is that we don't have to do this winner takes all. Winner takes everything and everybody kill all the competition piece. We can think about how we can coexist and we can focus on how we can survive. If we can survive our industry, we can thrive. And that has been my motto from day one. And that is how I focus on exit. And that is also how I focus on funding. And the only last piece I add to the funding piece is, since I mentioned sometimes the VC model doesn't work as well, is currently, and especially this year, if you look at some of the crowd equity funding models like Republics or WeFounder, you can raise up to $5 million on it. So if you have a viable business, a product, a service, you can actually get everyone, your clients, your supporters, as part of your ecosystem. So I strongly encourage women founders to look at that and consider that as your exit strategy ecosystem game plan.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you, Didi. I mean, I'm learning from you just in those last 5 minutes. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. And I will say a good friend actually based in Minnesota launched his Kickstarter, I want to say less than a month ago. Their goal was to raise $10,000. They've raised over $300,000. It's insane. So, I mean, people are home. People do have extra. I mean, some people don't, but a lot of people do actually have some extra cash this year. So anyways, that is a really good idea for some businesses. And I think that's also, maybe we can get to this if we have time, but knowing what kind of funding to go after also is really, really important. That's something that you hear sometimes is like, I have to go VC or I have to start with a Kickstarter. It's like, it's different for everyone. So that's an important thing to think about too. Kayla, why don't we go to you just in terms of kind of setting up the business for an exit strategy from day one?
Hard to follow. But I'll add a couple of things. That was amazing. I think first thing from an exit standpoint and consideration is understanding what kind of business you want to build. So I love what you said about, is this a lifestyle business? Is this a business you do want to exit? Is it something that you want it to be sustainable and grow into the future? And for us, our end goal has always been to heal millions. That is what we want to do. We want to heal millions. Now, I'm going to build a business that can do that on its own, and I'm going to build a business that makes it incredibly attractive for me to take this to levels I have never imagined earlier than I could have ever imagined. And that is the path we always paved, is let's build and make the decisions that are right for a billion-dollar company. I'm not taking shortcuts. I'm going to obviously, be efficient and effective, but I'm not taking shortcuts on things like building system. I'm not building it to sell. I'm building it if I need to run this business for many years to come. What was really important for us to understand if I'm building a $1 billion business, or if I'm building this for someone to take to $1 billion business, was what do the multiples look like? What do the exits look like? And making sure that my capital raises always mirrored the timeline that I had into place. And I was always playing that numbers game of, okay, if I'm a pre-revenue, if I take more than $7 million, I'm not going to deliver on a 2 to 3x of an exit. If I get to revenue stage and I look at, a Piper Sandler report, I see I need to hit $10 million to be able to come out of that penalty you pay with early revenues in my industry and drive something that's meaningful for my investors, and making sure that I align my capital raises and my milestones to support that very financial, fundamental picture. It is an equation. And I think, I'm oversimplifying it, but I constantly look at that when we look at fundraising rounds, and we've raised $5.5 million to date. And we're in a really interesting window right now where we are attractive to many strategics because we aren't, for our industry, we don't have a whole lot of capital, but we could take that influx and grow this into something big. So really paying attention to the kind of business you want to build and what those deal mechanics look like if that exit is something that you're interested in. My mentor through Springboard, she is just my saving grace. Lately, she's like, Kayla, here's what I need you to do during this time when you've got some really robust conversations going. I need you to not focus on what the end goal looks like exactly. Because if you do that, you're going to be frustrated along the whole process of, I need to get it there. And, I liken this, I try to take pictures of my kids and I'm so mad this whole time. I'm like, just sit still, smile, because I have this picture of what it should look like. I feel like I know what this one looks like. You can hear my 3.5-year-old coming up here. You just process, really build the map of I want to heal millions. I do think an exit makes sense for us. Go talk to some smart people who have done it and say, here are the gates that you need to jump over to be able to get there. Build map to be able to answer the core questions you don't have answered. You can then focus on every day taking steps forward to move towards that goal, versus sometimes being frustrated that that part didn't go exactly the way that you wanted it to. And so that has been a bit of a mindset shift for me lately. Is I think an exit can look a lot of different ways. And I think a strategic partnership can look a lot of different ways. And my end goal is getting this to millions. That allows me to take steps every day to move it forward. I'll tell you, just to answer the fundraising question, gosh, I couldn't agree more. It's hard out there to be a lady. As a Puerto Rican female, I started having those conversations when I was having a hard time, saying, how many of us do you got in your portfolio? You want to have that conversation? Do you want me to pull out the statistics of performance? Because I'm happy to. But let me tell you what it's like to be me for just a second, of what I have to deal with when I get feedback or those looks or those comments of like, oh, you actually are smarter than you look. It's just remarkable that we still have about, 2 to 3 million in, that I just started having the frank conversations about, let me show you what I've done. And what it allowed me to do, I'd say a couple pieces of advice is we started pitching to investors before we were ready for them, asking for advice and asking them for what they wanted to see so that they could watch our greatness. Tell you about it. The second thing is I have 0% success with cold calls. I need an introduction. I've never been able to get an investor on my own, and I need help and support. The third thing is I always give up too early on someone. Sometimes it just takes time. And if you build that relationship, there's been one time where an investor said to me, Kayla, we said no, but you just asked me for advice on something that's really critical and valuable to your company. Are you asking me for money? And I'm like, genuinely no. Can you please help me navigate this? And they invested a week later. And I'd say the last thing is, if it's a no for fundraising, I would just continue to berate them to get a why. Be something that could change the trajectory of your company. And that happened to us. Someone told us no. I asked my investor to follow up with them because they weren't responding to me. And they said, oh, we don't invest in commercial ready companies. I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Help me understand, And they're like, we like to see companies exit off the technology because of the amount of, and I was just like, and it helped me think of things in new ways. And so when you do get a no, go get the why. If it's messaging, fixable. If it's strategy, something to consider. So, all right, you brought the Puerto Rican. I have the hand motions.
I know, my God. I love that this is recorded. We get little snippets of all of your guys' great advice. I'm so excited. I think just a few comments. So I think, kind of talking about that timeline, because I know a lot of questions I get from Dolphin Tank participants or otherwise is, how much am I supposed to be raising? And I think that is a really important factor, not just how much do you need and then, out of zero, as Amy likes to say, but also, how much, thinking about the X, Y, Z axis basically of revenue, investment, and return to really time it out to realize what's realistic, what's not, where can you reach, where can you not? Because that's the biggest thing is you have to be confident in your numbers, right? If you're going to pitch to anyone, you have to be confident in your numbers. And so anyways, I think, and if any of you have resources, feel free to put it in the chat, or we can also hopefully collect those and put them in the podcast notes when those come out. But anyways, just different ways to think about how much you should raise, I think is an interesting thing to maybe not just take the first person's advice that you ask, because there's a few different ways to do it that might make sense for your company. And then, the feedback from investors or otherwise of anyone that says no is extremely valuable. Amit, I want to get to you before we wrap, especially since you have the expertise, positioning companies for exit from day one.
So, first of all, I want to just thank both Didi and Kayla for their points, excellent points. But I would really say it really does depend on the kind of business it is. Because sometimes you really do need that venture money to be able to grow. It's that window of opportunity that you might have. And I've been in that position as well. Sometimes you say, well, maybe I don't take it right now. I'm doing fine. But it's just that being able to scale it quickly enough. That's the dilemma, and that's a challenge when each entrepreneur needs to think through that and see what's right for them. And also to the point in terms of there are lots of different funding sources. And again, it depends on the kind of business. We've talked about whether it's venture or Kickstarters or strategic funding or going public on an outside exchange outside the US. But depending on the kind of industry, when you have biotechs, they certainly, or even healthcare related, some of the more deeper technology stuff, certainly grants, people start off with that, being able to have some kind of a validation there and then go on for additional different kinds of funding at that point. When it comes to exit, while we certainly have, as Didi mentioned, you certainly have the unicorns, but a lot of startups today look to exit through acquisitions, whether it's a larger company in their space or a PE firm, right? And acquiring companies may want to buy for different reasons, whether it's the innovation or the customer base. I'm always a big fan and a big proponent of the customer base, because I think that just trumps everything else. because for the acquirer, it's the value in terms of not just the new customers, but oftentimes it's a different type of new customers that they're looking for as well. That diversity makes it attractive for the acquirer. And then like just the kind of things that Kayla was talking about, doing the math, thinking through the revenue that you might have and what it might mean in terms of the valuation. But really you need to show the acquirer, if they're paying you like 5x or whatever, what's the path for them realizing that in, say, a 3 to 5 year time horizon as well. So, and then, just thinking also in terms of timing and kind of getting ready for it. And even early on, it may not be for a few years from them. One is absolutely the customer base, but there are other more tactical considerations, whether it's a clean cap table or clean financials or the IP protection. And then just thinking through how the exits might come through. It may come through partners, and it is absolutely a good thing as you're growing your business. Of course, the plus is you're getting business together, working on deals, but they may potentially be acquirers as well in the future, or it may be investors on your board, and again, it depends the kind of investors, the stage of investors. Early stage investors are okay with, exits in the 50 to 100 million range if they're getting decent multiples, good multiples they're happy with. On the other hand, if you have late stage VCs in there, they're looking for much bigger exits, and which works out, you can let it grow and it works out, but it is also a riskier game because it may not always work out, right? There are challenges in there, and just being aware of that and recognizing that. So a bunch of different things, but I think what's most important is to realize what is the business and who are you as an entrepreneur, and what's the fit in there. There's no one single right answer for every company as such.
Yeah. And that's why I think, going back to Springboard, we always try, if there's companies that, or we work really hard, especially when companies are going through our program, to match them with folks that can really fill the holes and gaps of resources that they don't already have, but also put them in touch with people that have gone down the same business model path or do have a similar product or business model, so that you can relate on those terms. And I know it sounds kind of like, well, duh, but if you aren't part of any networks or communities yet, seeking out those role models, mentors, or whoever who have literally done what you're trying to do, in a similar way, and learn from them. And anyways, cultivating the connections you have and beyond. And I think we're doing that now. So I think we'll wrap. Any last comments from anyone? I think you guys have shared amazing advice. We're so proud and honored to have each of you as Springboard alumni and to have you in our community. Thank you to those watching, and excited to share this later as well. Thanks for the questions in the chat. And again, you can learn more about Springboard at sb.co, and also we'll be launching our podcast, Been There, Run That, later this month. So watch out for that. Thank you, Didi, Kayla, and Amita, and we will see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.